In this video we get more birds for our big year. We see some rare sea ducks and we see a wader spectacular. This adventure starts with an angry wren at Llandulus shore in North Wales. We were here looking for a red-throated diver. We'd seen the other two British divers earlier in the year and wanted to complete the hat trick. And this place is generally pretty reliable at this time of the year for these birds. There were a few birds on the water as we arrived, including this red-breasted merganser that was preening and this pair of shag, one adult, one young. Soon, a bird flew past. It was our intended quarry, the red-throated diver. This is a species I've seen here a few times, and sometimes they come in really close as well. We decided now to wander down the beach to see what else we could find, stopping by some rocks en route where there was some turnstone. These birds were sat on the rocks giving us excellent views. As we walked down the beach we saw this curlew that was feeding on the shoreline, stopping to have a bit of a stretch. Although it was lovely seeing these wading birds close to shore, we were really interested in what was out on the sea at a distance. As Kaylee scanned, she picked up the more obvious species like the vast numbers of common scoters that congregate here. It pays to scan through these scoters to see if there are any other species, sometimes rarities too. We picked out this time a couple of guillemots and another red-throated diver. Happy with adding this species to our year list, we headed back towards the car park away from the bathing gulls in the estuary. When we arrived, there were some other birders there, so we inquired what they were looking at. Apparently, some surf scoters have been reported. These are an American species which turn up on the west coast of England occasionally. We have seen them at this location last year. Scanning through the distant scoters, I spotted this velvet scoter that you can tell because it's got a white wing as it flaps. Finally, we picked out the surf scoters. It's going to be tricky for you guys to spot them. They're in the distance with white on the back of their head. I can only apologise for the rough footage because it was at a serious distance. So here's some footage from last year. With a really successful trip to Llandulus, we headed to Ross-on-Sea. Hey folks, we're at Ross-on-Sea looking for some wading birds. Occasionally there's purple sandpiper here. We've already seen a new bird for our list, which was a ringed plover, which Kaylee loves plovers.
I love plovers.
So yeah, we're heading a little bit further up to see if we can track down any purple sandpiper. I'd seen reports very recently of people seeing purple sandpipers at high tide, and as Kaylee loves her wading birds, we took a walk on the front whilst the tide came in. On the beach there were a few ringed plovers, and across on a rocky headland there were dunlin and redshank, but no purple sandpipers here. So we moved on along the sea wall to see if we could find them on the rocks. After a short walk I did see a few shapes sat on the rocks. These were turnstone, groups of them, roosting, waiting for the tide to go out. Amongst these, there was something a little different. That was our purple sandpiper. At first, Kaylee spotted one that was roosting with its head under its wing. As we kept on scanning, we saw a couple more, some of them right on the edge of the rocks, picking up morsels of food after every wave came in. These are wonderful little waders and a great pleasure to watch. Continuing with the waders, a couple of days later, just before high tide, we headed to Hoy Lakeshore on the Wirral. Hey folks, it's windy and cold, you might not be able to hear us very well, but we are at Heswall Shore. There's just the most amazing scene in front of us of just hundreds of waders. It's nearly high tide and they've all been flushed in. There's so much. Check this out. We'd heard rumours about there being hundreds of waders here just before high tide, so hoping for a few more species for our list, we began to scan through the flocks of birds in front of us. We weren't the only ones there either. The most numerous birds there by far were dunlin, but these were joined by a few other species interspersed between them. Quite a few of them were not. Scanning further, we found some larger waders like these grey plover. These were in winter plumage. In summer they have a striking black front. There were a couple of slightly paler birds amongst the dunlin and knot. These were sanderling, if you can pick out the pale grey bird with a little bit of black at the top of its wing. It was sometimes tough to try and pick out other species as the huge flocks were moving in and out and along the shore. A couple of times being spooked by an RNLI lifeboat, but then landing in great numbers on the tide line. And as the tide got higher, the birds got closer, which gave all the spectators a great view of this amazing avian wonder. Amongst all these dunlin and knot, there were also a group of oyster catchers, stuck together in the ever-rising tide. As the water got higher, the birds slowly started moving on, with the last ones being tummy deep in water. This was an amazing spectacle and quite a privilege to see. As we drove a little bit further down, there was this group of Brent geese, which was another bird for our year list. Fantastic. The next stop was Park Gate. This is an area of marshland that doesn't usually get covered in water, but occasionally, a few times a year, they have a very high tide and the water makes it even into this marsh. This attracts hundreds of birds, mainly geese and ducks, with some waders, gulls and birds of prey too. It was very busy and it took us a while to find a parking spot, but when we finally did, we scanned the marsh. Seeing the vast numbers of geese, loads of them were pink-footed geese, with some Canada geese interspersed. Some of the pink-footed geese got quite close to us, which gave us really nice views. These high tides are notoriously good for raptors, and it didn't disappoint this time either, with amazing views of this marsh harrier hunting. This majestic predator flew really low over the reeds, dropping a few times, presumably to try and catch prey. This individual is a female, and was an amazing sight. And although I could have watched her forever, another raptor quickly took the spotlight. I saw a couple of other birders looking up at a building the other side of the road, and sat on the building by the chimney pot was a female kestrel. She didn't seem at all bothered by passers-by. She just sat there surveying the scene in front of her. Eventually she flew into the marsh and began to hunt. Looking back over the marsh, there were plenty of egrets out there, like this little egret, and scanning a little further out, I watched this greater blackback gull, which seemed to be a youngster, chasing another gull around, who I imagine had food. That little egret that we saw wasn't the only egret. I found this great white egret that was quite far out into the marsh. It seemed to be bothered by something, possibly a predator. Seeing this high tide at Park Gate was quite a spectacle, and there were plenty of birds. Unfortunately, no new ones for our year list though. So we set off, leaving the kestrel, which had now relocated to a TV aerial, and headed to Burton Mere wetlands, also on the Wirral. When we arrived, it was mid-afternoon. Hey folks, we're here at Burton Mere wetlands, our local lake reserve, to see if we can get any other species for today. Looking out from the visitor centre, there wasn't that many birds. I did notice this hooper swan which was sat on a muddy bit of the scrape. We set about walking around the reserve, seeing some common or small birds around the feeders, like this blue tit, and there was quite a large group of great tits as well. Flying back and to, there was also some finches like this goldfinch. Leaving the feeders behind, we wandered through the reserve to a screen that looked over some marsh. Whilst we were there, we saw a dark shape fly in, which I thought was a heron, until it landed, and it was a great white egret. These majestic white birds are increasing in numbers in the UK, and I don't remember a time I've been to Burton Mere and not seen one recently. From the same screen, there was a little bird fishing, which was a little grebe. This bird stopped for a while to preen, giving us great views, And a little bit further around the reserve on one of the pools, there was a lovely pair of shovelers. There is a hide a little bit further around the reserve which is usually pretty good, called Border Hide. We didn't go there today because it was horrendously muddy underfoot. So we headed slowly back to the visitors centre, past this very friendly robin and a pair of mollards that were preening on a fallen tree. When we got back to the visitors centre, we scanned again, picking out another bird for our year list, the black-tailed godwit. There was a group of them feeding on the grass amongst a few ducks, including these widgeon. As we were about to leave, one of the staff pointed out an avocet. Apparently this was the first one back to breed. Burton Mere has a success story for avocets breeding, so it was nice to see the first one back. But we had to head off now, and we headed back to Parkgate, not only to see all the birds as the sun went down, but to get a chippy dinner. Parkgate Chip Shop is excellent. After sitting in the car, eating our fish and chips, we looked out to see this lovely song thrush singing as the sun went down, and then looking over the marsh, there was some birds still present, like these little egret fishing, and this mixed group of birds including more little egret, a great white egret, and a few pink-footed geese. It had been a wonderful day, seeing spectacular scenes of waders and geese, and some lovely birds of prey too, but now it was going dark and we had to go home. We also have to end the video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, please subscribe, and please press the notification bell. See you soon for the next adventure.